Okay guys, today I'm a little nervous for this video, to be honest, because our society and specifically the communities that I belong to are very pro-label. We like labels. Humans are labeling machines. We are crazy for labels. I think it comes down to wanting to be able to quickly identify friend or foe. I think that's what it comes down to. Evolutionarily, you could probably make a case that the reason we label each other and the reason we do that is exactly that. But the title of this video is obviously I don't like labels. So some backstory first. If you were going to ascribe some labels to me, you could give me autistic, farm boy, country boy, dumb blonde, bisexual, pansexual, gay. You could give me ADD, ADHD, Canadian, British, English. There's 101 labels. There's probably an infinite number of labels that you could give me that tell you a little bit about who I am, my personality, those kinds of things. The problem with that is they tell you almost nothing. Even though you're thinking, oh, well, you just said that they tell you lots about you. Yes and no. The autism spectrum is vast, you know? There is a huge spectrum of people who have very different wants, desires, interests. Same with a Canadian. I mean, I might be one Canadian, but there are 39 million of us. So it doesn't really tell you anything. And growing up, I used to think that your labels were super important and they helped you identify, especially in the LGBT community. I mean, the LGBTQ A2 plus, that community is a string of labels. That's literally what we do, is we have lumped this community in together based on a label. And we are very different people. And I think in some ways it's good to feel like you have a community, a wider community that you can identify with. But at the same time, it leaves you vulnerable to being stereotyped and stigmatized. It leads you to prejudice and all kinds of things. So I used to think that labels were really important and that they were awesome, and I would have labels in my bio about being bisexual or Canadian, like I'd have a little Canadian flag, and I thought, like, that's great. That's like super important to have those labels. But as I've gotten older and as I've sort of, I don't know if you could call it maturing, but as I've gotten older, I have realized that these labels tend to divide people more than they lump us together and put us into a community. And so the problem I have is that if I label myself as a vegetarian, suddenly there is a group of people out there who thinks that they know everything about me. They're like, oh, he's a vegetarian, he's one of these tree huggers. And suddenly you are lumped in with a bunch of people that you might not agree with. You might not agree with the whole reason why a lot of people are vegetarian. You might, and that's fine. But suddenly people are able to prejudice? People are able to persecute you for your labels much easier. And I also think that so that's the external problem with labels, is that externally people see you and they see your labels and they assume, oh, I know everything I need to know about this guy because he's got his pronouns in his bio. That's clear. And suddenly they take offense to that. So that's the external problem with labels. But I'm a little more interested in of course I am. I'm a little more interested in the internal problems with labels. And it's kind of like the stories that we tell ourselves and why these stories have a very big impact on how we see ourselves. And this comes back a little bit to some mindfulness and some, a little bit of spirituality almost, because if I view myself as gay or as I don't know, a vegetarian. I'm not a vegetarian. I don't know why I keep bringing that up, but if I label myself as these things, suddenly I begin to see myself as them. And it creates kind of an ego, and it creates this whole idea of like, well, I'm gay. And I think this is getting to the core of why I wanted to talk about this today, is that I think a lot of people really see themselves as their labels rather than seeing themselves as human beings. And I know I might get some hate for this because a lot of people, when anybody talks about this, especially relating to like the LGBT, usually the critics will say, well, you're just homophobic. You know, it's internalized homophobia. You're afraid of who you are, and you don't, you hate yourself. It's self-hate. But I'm coming to this from sort of a philosophical point of view, and like frankly, I don't hate myself. I think it is quite evident that I love who I am. I love who I interact with, and I love what I do. So, but I still want to talk about this. I still want to explore this idea. And so I think when I came out as gay initially, I didn't really know what I was or anything, but I found a lot of comfort in sort of the gay community, in the label, in, reaching out to people based on our shared labels. And that can be a good thing. But I think it turned into something where it was almost like I had a victim identity, and I viewed myself as like this persecuted group. I'm part of the gay community, when in reality, like, I wasn't persecuted, and I haven't been persecuted. I don't see that. My experience is probably very different than someone who lives in, say, Saudi Arabia or in China. Um, I haven't been persecuted for my orientation, for who I love. Sure, I've had a few interesting moments out with past partners or things like that. I've had some like interesting moments, but nothing that has like psychologically damaged me. Nothing that I would consider, detrimental to who I am or what I do. But because I had that label, I it's almost like I adopted the persecution of the gay community when I myself have not experienced it. Like it is not it's not okay for me to talk about being persecuted as a gay person when that has not happened. I will happily talk about my experiences and some of the, I don't know, interesting or some of the differences there are between being gay and straight, but I can't pretend like I have been through this shared trauma and this shared difficulty. Like, my family fully accepted me when I came out. And so I think the problem we have with labels is it can allow people, or it gives people free reign to kind of adopt that victim mentality. In this case, I'm not saying this is for all labels, but I'm just saying that in my case, adopting that label was definitely more detrimental than it was to not have it. And so today I have become one of those insufferable people that says, oh, I don't like labels. I don't like to label myself. And I used to hate those people. I used to get so incredibly angry. It's like, but you do. Like, everybody has labels. Like, it's natural. Like, everybody has a box. Like, get in it. But today I am totally the opposite. I'm like, don't put me in a box. Don't call me this. And that probably sounds quite funny coming from a TikToker who uses gay hashtags and is constantly talking about gay culture and like farm culture and stuff. Like, I talk about a lot of the labels, but I see that as sort of a separation. I have a separation between that and who I actually see myself as. So from now on in my daily life, when somebody asks me a question about a label, I just say like, oh, like I'm a human being, I just happen to go on dates with boys and girls and, like that kind of thing. Whereas before, I was very quick to judge and put labels on, and life is so much more. Life is richer when you don't do that. When you meet somebody and you don't immediately judge them for their labels, it is so much nicer having a human connection with somebody and having like a real communication with somebody, based on just being humans. Like that's the only label that really comes down to mattering. Um, and even then, like, you connect with dogs and cats and horses and all kinds of things. So like even that human label is a label we use to distinguish ourselves from the animals. I mean, look at the idea of like humankind, like man and beast. It's like, no, it's beast and beast. We are all animals living on this planet trying to reproduce and trying to survive and thrive. So I don't know. I guess like I'm asking you guys to ask yourselves, what labels do you ascribe to yourself? And then think really mindfully about whether those labels are a good thing in your life or if they're a bad thing in your life. I'm not saying there isn't a place for labels. Like I said, when I first came out, it was so nice to be able to have a community that I could talk to, that I could relate certain things with. However, it develops into something that becomes an identity. And at the end of the day, none of us actually have an identity. Like at the end of the day, you are not the stories you tell yourself. There's a Zen story of a Zen master and a vacuum salesman knocks on the Zen master's door. And the Zen master opens the door and says, "Oh, hello, who are you?" And the salesman says, "Hi, I'm a vacuum salesman. I'm here to talk to you about this." And the Zen master goes, "No, no, who are you?" And the vacuum salesman sort of looks at him and goes, "Well, like I'm John Smith." And the Zen master goes, "No, that's your name. Who are you? I'm not asking for your profession or your name. Like, who are you?" And this goes back and forth quite a while until the vacuum salesman has no idea who he is. And that's the correct way to be, is to not know who you are, because we are an amalgamation of everything we have ever seen and we believe, and what our parents have taught us, what our teachers have taught us. We are just a stream of consciousness that connects everything that we have experienced with our identity. And when you think about it, that doesn't actually like refer to who you are. You are in the present. You are right now, you are watching this YouTube video. Your brain is processing what I'm saying. That is it. That is all you are, is this stream of consciousness. And don't take offense to that, by the way. Like, I'm not meaning that in some kind of like mean way or something. What I'm talking about is that you are a stream of consciousness and you identify with yourself to such a strong degree that you are this label and that label and this label. And when that becomes the only things that you identify with, it leads to a lot of just miscommunication and a lot of like, I think it leads to a lot of problems. And I remember reading something Jordan Peterson wrote. I don't know if it's in his 12 Rules for Life or not, but he was talking about group identity and how identity politics is really screwing up our society. And I used to sort of brush that off and be like, oh my gosh, like he's so right wing and blah, 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 blah. But in all honesty, the group identity thing has gotten out of control. I mean, as a gay person, the biggest criticisms that I will get is when I talk negatively about certain parts of the gay community. Like, I don't get many negative comments, but when I do, it's almost exclusively from other gay men who are angry that I have attacked our community. And I haven't attacked it, I've criticized it. It's fair to criticize anybody. Nobody is above reproach. But when I get negative comments, it's almost always exclusively from gay men who are saying like, well, that's your experience, that's not mine. I'm like, well, how can I comment on your experience? Of course I'm gonna use my experience, like, duh. But I get these negative comments and, I have to brush them off. But I think the reason I get them is because these guys don't like their community being attacked, even from within, even if I'm raising good criticism about, specific behaviors that aren't appropriate. So I think that is where our identity and our labels can become pretty toxic. And I'm sure there's a lot of psychology and there's a lot of like anthropological cultural things and nuances that you could talk about. And I'm not very equipped to talk about those. But I'd love to hear your comments on this. I'm super interested in the idea of the stories that we tell ourselves and how we see ourselves and those kinds of things, because it really shapes our actions. You know, if you can get to the root of how you see yourself and how you think others perceive you, you've kind of like unlocked a bit of a cheat code in life, because you can kind of then analyze why you do the actions that you do and why you think the things that you think. You know, if you see yourself as a victim of oppression, because of X, Y, or Z, that whether that's correct or not, like, I don't care if it's true or not. It could very well be true. There are people who are oppressed. I'm not saying there aren't. But whether you see yourself as an oppressed person or not shapes how you act in society. It shapes how you perceive yourself. It shapes how you interact with everybody around you. I mean, if you, rightly or wrongly, if you think you are an oppressed person, you are going to act a very different way than if you see yourself as a human being, part of this huge species across the planet who speaks multiple languages. And, you know, it changes how you see the world and how you interact with it. And at the end of the day, those are the two most important things in our human culture, is how you perceive the world and then how you go about living in this world. So, you know, I know it's gotten, like, it's expanded quite large. You know, I was initially talking about labels and how they're bad, but it really does come down to interacting with the world. And so, yeah, let me know your thoughts. If you're still here, thank you. I appreciate you. You are clearly someone who is very interested in sort of the nuances of this stuff. And I mean, I'm so interested in people. I'm so curious about people. I love people. I love meeting people and talking to them and seeing how they think and how they work. So, but anyway, guys, again, thank you for watching. Please leave your comments. I'd love to know about your stories and your experiences. I do read almost every comment on YouTube. I don't necessarily interact, but I definitely read them. So thank you again for watching. Have a beautiful, beautiful day, and I will talk to you tomorrow.